Jen and Neha, and myself included, we've all led ERGs at our previous respective companies. And so to give folks a little bit of who might not be familiar with employee resource groups, can you speak to the benefits of having one at a company and maybe how it could be, how it could also maybe be used as a way to motivate folks to join a company? Because I definitely know when I was recruiting at Flexport, I would talk about the ERG and the fact that I was so happy being a part of it. And so can you also shed a little bit of light on that? May, I think you're muted.
Thank you, Opal. So at Hire.com, I was part of the EPIC group. So that stands for Equity, People, Inclusion, and Color. So myself, along with other colleagues in San Francisco, New York, and then we actually had our head of people that was part of the group as well. So I think just having a project sponsor is where things go really far, right? So she was able to just sign off on any initiatives that we came up with quite quickly versus having to kind of stall and delay on some of the initiatives that we would come up with. We also had a budget assigned to activities. So it's not enough to just say, okay, you can, create a Slack channel and having this safe space or a brave space, if we want to call it that, where people can, surface what's on their mind around, um, you know, certain factors that relate to their identity and their lived experience. You actually need to invest as a company and actually like provide a budget for that group to really be successful. And I think this was actually really helpful for us during the 2020 peak of racial injustice, in the United States, that I felt our entire office also, felt like we feel like we need to stand with our colleagues in the States and understand what's going on. And so we actually held 2 racial injustice roundtables, and one was particularly for the folks that are in the UK because of time zone differences, and then we had folks in SF. So people were welcome to join either or both, and we were then able to kind of address what we're hearing, on the outside, and without making any assumptions for how anybody feels. Then we split into breakout rooms to then have everybody kind of share their experience and how they're feeling. And then, if they have resources to share with their small group, then we would compile that and share that across, for the company to take a look at. But also then I think it led to a lot of people feeling more safe, included, and, more positive, I think, because the news was obviously really weighing on everyone at that time. And I think we're still feeling a lot of the ripple effect from that year. Um, and yeah, the last thing I'll say about that is, even in times of like protest, for example, things can get really dangerous if you know that your employees are going out to protest. I don't think that, there's any harm in allowing for these employee resource groups to also, provide like some information on how to safely protest. And like, if you are, we acknowledge that some of our employees might be going out to, support a cause. We wanted to also make sure that you're safe and that you're able to, come to work without feeling like something horrible has happened, because obviously there were horrible things happening. But whatever we can do to make people feel safe as well through resources and information sharing, I'm always a big proponent of.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, Paul, if you don't mind, and reject the premise of the question itself.
All right, please. We love radical candor.
She's game. Yeah, and I'm being a little bit dramatic, but yeah. So ERGs, of course, are really important and often very effective part of a DEI program, but it is only one piece of the puzzle.
Yep.
But it happens to be a very visible, a very active one, because a lot of folks have been part of it. I totally get it, but just because it is visible, well known, doesn't mean it is complete. And I do see an opportunity for startups to really expand that view.
Ooh.
We talked about how the just like recruiting can be a lot holistic.
Yep.
Really understanding the problem and finding out different solutions, especially the ones that are startup specific or whatever industry context specific. And ERGs, yes, may be helpful, but it may not be the best thing for you.
Yep.
So a couple things that I recommend, and I actually also teach this in, we have a startup recruiting bootcamp that's all about recruiting, but we also have the same, but for DEI work as well. So I can drop some links. We can share that later on. So a couple different things. For a lot of us, DEI is seen as oh, that's just like the woman problem, or like, oh, that's just like we're the people of color. But like, let's say I, as a white man, am like, that's not my issue. That is a gap that you can close. That is something that the company can work towards through conversations, through leadership, through integrating into the everyday culture. So people start understanding what DEI actually is, everything that we just talked about. So people start taking more ownership, and the company, by becoming internally just like more sophisticated, developed at it, instead of just like fighting, one-on-one every day, you can take on bigger and bigger ambitious projects. But that means you have to start really, really small. Second, DEI does become often, I think, associated with crises management. Again, I don't blame the situation, because for a lot of startups, that's a starting point. When something's in the news, when it is legitimately a very scary situation that people are being affected by. So absolutely, crisis management, reacting, and having resources around that is one part of DEI, but not the only part. What are ways we can integrate DEI into the everyday culture, whether it's through different activities, forums, making sure there's a DEI lens and competency to everything we do in management, leadership, people ops, recruiting, and not just, oh God, like, what did the Supreme Court do this week? And now we have to all panic about it. It really encompasses all different things. So I'm happy to answer more questions about it. But yeah, ERGs are just one piece of the puzzle. It's a really, really valuable one that's literally proven through studies to improve with employee retention and productivity. But let's not just put all of our eggs in one basket either.
Yep, it's not a Band-Aid there's no Band-Aid or one, size fits all solution. So thank you for that.